I'm Dean, otherwise known as Rocket. So I'm what we call a game runner, uh, which Dylan, our hype mayor, actually sort of semi came up with. So essentially, my role is to have the financial and creative authority. So very similar as to how it's done in, say, film, television, well, television and stuff like that. So it basically means that if needed, I can come in and break a deadlock and make sure things are being pushed in the right way. So a lot of my role has been focused on figuring out how we should do things and how we should approach things, and then just making sure that things get nudged along in that direction.
Nice. Very good. So yeah, we've got some great questions from the community for you guys to jump into today. So I'll kick us off with a few short ones at the start. A good one here from Bacon Particles. How many more missions will be offered at launch compared to what was already seen in the beta weekends?
Wants to cover that one? Me?
Yeah, sure.
I think the general approach has been to try and figure out uh, how we should approach handling the missions, and I think people would have seen as we went through the beta weekend periods, we kind of experimented with different ways of doing missions, and then sort of honed in and basically what we've provided for here, and I think we kind of want to expand with that. So I think for us, it's less about quantity and a little bit more about quantity in terms of, sorry, it's less about quantity and much more about quality in terms of what basically delivers us through to that experience. So what we really want to do is try and provide stuff that gives you provide missions that give you a really compelling reason to come back in and try a different area or a different approach or something like that in Icarus. So we haven't really been focusing massively on hey, we need to achieve this particular quantity. It's really been more about what are the types of missions we can do, and then I think even beyond 1.0, it'll be about it continuing to expand upon that as well. I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Dylan.
Yeah, so the way we're getting a lot of them in is, after deciding on sort of the structure, the designers have got quite a long list. I mean, the the list might be different on the last day, but we're looking at sort of dozens. But they're all sort of they start out with putting the thin version of the mission in and then building the detail into it as we go. So yeah, that's kind of that point you were talking about building quality into them. Um, is just going to be
Mm,
something that we're doing right up to release.
And a lot of it as well is about what works with the game. So that's been a big focus, and often we'll be like, hey, um, this will be a really cool mission to do, or this will be a really cool thing to do, and we try it out, and we just don't like it, and we just don't think it's any good. And so it won't make it in, or it'll be changed, or something like that.
awesome. That's great. And it kind of leads a little bit into as we talk about the future. This here from December. With the change from the free to play to cash out to a purchase game, how will the future editions be handled? Will I still be able to buy extra character slots to have more than three? He's personally gunning for a disco shaped, ball shaped dropship. So, bit of a broad question with some specifics.
Uh, Look, one of the, I suppose I'll say, cool things about dropping the free to play side of it meant that we didn't sort of really have to invest a lot of time into figuring out monetization and stuff like that, because you do the monetization up front by just getting money from customers, and then that's what you use to make the game. So you don't have to kind of agonize over, oh, will people get upset if we monetize this, and delve into all that. I still think it would have been cool if we'd been able to do it more, just from the challenge that no one had really sort of made a free to play survival game like this. So, and it's always nice to do things that, or try to do things that people haven't done before. But I think it removed a lot of complexity and a lot of problems that I think people saw that we were heading towards. And imagine if we were trying to make the game and do all this stuff at the same time as figure out uh, how do we monetize it? How do we make sure we don't run out of money? by hiring too many people, but the game not selling as well, because it can take years to make money from a free to play game. So that's a long-winded way of saying we haven't really thought a lot about additional content type stuff. I suppose I'm kind of reluctant myself, because I think in many ways adding in, hey, pay this money to get this, it can often throw up more problems than it makes you in money. So I think I'm approaching that from a pretty cautious standpoint. I think it is useful, and I think if you look at our other products like stationeers and stuff like that, I think we could do better as a studio at figuring out how to make a bit more from our games and stuff like that, because it allows you to make better games and bigger games and stuff like that, and get a bigger team and a better team. So I think it's something we'll look at, but I think it's being approached with extreme caution. And even though people have brought it up internally, I've kind of hand waved it away, because the phrase that I use a lot is the game comes first. And that means several things. It means that we're not focusing too much on the monetization, because people just buy the game, and that's kind of done there. And the second part of that is not necessarily as good as the community, good for the community, which means that we also focus a lot on what's necessary for the game. So that's why, like, I haven't been able to stream as much, or at all, and stuff like that. And maybe we're really slow with getting the supporters edition set up and all those kinds of things. There, it's really because we are just fully focused on the game, and a lot of time will get put into the game, and sometimes other things we need to do aren't done as a result.
Cool. That's awesome.
So I
Cool.
I didn't really answer the question. We haven't actually got specific plans for that kind of stuff. So it's sort of a gentle no for the moment. Just because we're really focused on getting the game right. I think too many games have been destroyed by poor monetization, and I think survival games are particularly susceptible to this problem, because it's very much about gathering resource and progression and stuff like that. And yeah, so we're going to be,
Mm,
I think, pretty cautious around that front. It'd be cool if we could do something though, because I think there is some
mm,
interesting approaches with monetization from some games, but I think we'll be pretty gentle with it.
mm. Awesome. Cool. So that kind of talks into a bit more into the content. So this question will fit here, which is from Andrew. What kind of content updates can we expect between the DLC chapters?
I kind
Um,
of thought this was going to be part of that last one. You can go for it, Dean. Sorry.
no, were you going to go for it?
Well, I was going to say a lot of one of the things we're going to be spending a lot of time looking at post release is how to sort of work in. We're going to be doing a lot of content updates that are happening outside of the work towards sort of one of those first chapter releases with Dangerous Horizons and New Frontiers. But we'll have to content could across the board be added in those updates. It'll take us a while to sort of get the right cadence on sort of figuring out how much the team can do during one of those periods and the sort of things the players want. Because I know that the designers for sure will have all sorts of things that they will continue to want to add after release that we'll probably just continue doing.
Yeah, for me, it's only really about getting. This has been really about getting started, and I'll kind of segue this question into something I think is pretty important to point out. We've tried to use the beta period for what I think a beta is really good at, which is to sort of experiment with something with a game that's almost done. So we've done the broad architecture, but sort of how you put it together and how you balance it and how you approach some things wasn't nailed down, and it's changed a lot in a very small space of time. We spent a lot of time developing the project to do that. And it's important that process doesn't go on too long. I saw some really good people having a discussion on one of the subreddits about how and I'm paraphrasing pretty badly, but that they were pointing out that as players that we were assessing the game, playing it sort of wrong through the beta, because people's progress was getting lost uh, regularly, and you were kind of approaching it fresh. So that would often make the game seem a lot more frustrating than it necessarily would otherwise if you were just coming into it after the game launches. I think it's a really good point, and that's why I think if the beta run on too long, we start to draw the wrong conclusions because the game's just getting changed constantly. So with the end of the beta period, we've kind of solidified the game down, and that's when we can actually pump in new content uh, in a much more, not necessarily relaxed fashion, but in a much more confirmed way because the game's not changing all over the place. You can sort of imagine how difficult it is for us, our art team and our audio team and that at the moment, to be trying to add content to the game when the game is changing all the time. And yeah, so I guess we have pretty big, I think, and exciting plans for additional content that are enabled by us ending that beta period and starting to look and focus at the game as a I suppose solidified thing.
Mm. Oh, awesome! That's great. Here's a good one for game going in the future from Landford. How much more alien will the planet get?
Yeah, so it's something that's been brought up a lot, and it's something that we always want to do and like to do. But I think good art in a game is about consistency and making sure that the art all stitches together well. And we wanted to kind of take the player from a place of familiarity and then drag them into something else because I think that makes it that does all the emotional hooks about getting you into the game and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's something we do want to introduce, and we will see coming in over time. And you've already seen it with the sandworm and stuff like that. So uh, we're kind of introducing it and on the edges as it
Mm,
makes sense with the lore and stuff like that too.
awesome. All right, so here's a good one that goes a bit more into specifics around the fauna and flora. Again, from Andurin, is Icarus is a home to a variety of mammals, but is apparently devoid of other taxonomic kingdoms like birds and reptiles. Will there be additional phyla added aside from fish? Will we see more species?
In terms of
So I guess if we consider what we have now, are we likely to see more species such as birds, reptiles, other things you might expect in a more Earth-like biome?
how much are we saying, Dylan?
I don't know. You're the game runner.
Yeah, definitely. So the only reason I'm a little reluctant is because we have to try some things out and see how they work. So, for example, let's say hypothetically we were going to add a bird, particularly if it was, hypothetically a bird I really like, a New Zealand mountain parrot called a Kia, which is absolutely my favorite bird, and people should go Google them. They're just incredible, incredible animals. The problem with it is they are quite different from the animals we have at the moment, which means they need a new unique animation set, and how they transition between animations is very different. And then they need a bunch of AI behaviors and a whole bunch of stuff like that. What we think for something like that might be very straightforward, but we actually have to figure it out. So the answer is a cautiously optimistic yes. There will be more different kinds of animals, not just sort of variations on four-legged animals. But it
Mm,
has to be tempered with does it work, and can we, without investing ridiculous amounts of effort and breaking the game, make sure that they start working. Because there's no point in us say adding birds to the game if they just look terrible. Um, they don't work out well. So we've had experiments with a number of different things, and yeah, and they've worked out really well. So I think it's a matter of, and then sometimes they haven't. So for us, it's a matter of we try something out, see how it goes, and if it doesn't work out, maybe try it again or just ditch it. So it's definitely something we have ongoing plans to introduce more and
mm,
more of as time goes on. And I guess the longer we have on the game, the more we can try different stuff out because we've
mm.
basically got a bunch of other stuff working. And I think people will have seen that as we went through the beta weekend period. The game just did get better and better as people find stuff out. They post it on feature upvote. So that allows us to invest more time now in things like birds and whatever stuff like that.
Awesome. Awesome. So cool one here from Cass talking about the map. So can you give us some idea on how you'll keep the map from becoming static and predictable? How we plan on making it have some longevity because it's all handcrafted and not procedurally generated?
Well, that's the $1 million question, and I think that's the hypothesis that the entire project is to try and test, right? Is can you make a survival game that's really based on the base mechanics, rather than being based on just shoving constant end-game stuff in and unbalancing the game, and do it in a session-based way and make people want to keep playing it. And I don't think I can necessarily say we'll definitively answer that until a product's completely finished in like a few years or whatever. And I think that yeah, it's one of those things that we just have to sort of wait and see how that works out. But I think that what we've been able to do so far is add things to the game and then play around with them. I'll give an example. A few months before release, of the beta, the game, I think we were getting some pretty bad feedback on it. I don't know if you guys remember. Some people worried, oh, it's not fun, it's not this or that, and the pace of the game was way too fast. So you could essentially get to basically the tier 4 stuff in under an hour. And that was because we'd added the stuff to the game and we were testing it and stuff like that. And we dramatically slowed the game down. And suddenly people were reporting that it was a lot of fun. And so I think that just shows that a lot of the changes that you make that make it really fun and make you want to come back and play the game again can actually be some weird ones around pacing and having an interesting goal to go to. And then when you get to that goal, then you have another goal. And I think there's games like Satisfactory and Factorio that do a really good job of pulling you towards a goal. Oh, I'm going to do this thing, and then kind of distracting you with another goal on the side. Well, maybe you should optimize your steel production, and so you go back and you change all that. And I think that is that's a philosophy that we want to approach once we've got the game in the state we want. Is okay, what stuff can we add in? We've said about it before, and we tried it out, and we were originally going to have it in for the beta, but took it out just because of the pacing problems. But things like vehicles and automation and electricity and things like that are all things that basically we've got essentially being able to uh, give you those additional layers of the game on top of it. I am really pleased that we focused the beta on the core parts of the game, and I think I saw people pick up on this on the subreddits and in Steam as well. Some of the super fans, I think, picked up that we were really trying to focus on what the game makes it tick, even to the point where that almost hurt us with popularity a little bit, because and that comes back to that the game comes first. I think that we've really tried to focus on, hey, we need to try this thing, we have to answer this question. Maybe playing around with this might get us a bit of heat, like Dances with Wolves, or whatever the meme was around the beers. So we'd often make decisions and try stuff out because they were important answers that we needed to know, even if we were going to cop a little bit of heat for them in the
And
beta
because the
weekend.
beta was the time to do that,
Yeah, and that if we wanted to have a game and that we were going to be really happy with, then we kind of had to do it. And there was a lot of pretty new stuff that we were trying out with Icarus, and you just never know how that's going to work out. And I suppose inevitably it's always going to be problematic at the start, which it has been. And yeah.
On the
Fantastic.
map, on the map point, you know, we're definitely trying to see how much sort of mileage we can get out of Olympus, which is the map players are on now. But we have other ones being made as well. It's not like we're just we're not putting all our eggs in that basket, but it is good to test out and see how much
The
you
big
know, how
problem
important
we
that is to
haven't
the experience.
the big problem we haven't sort of been able to deal with. Originally, we actually planned to have a heap more missions. Sorry, a heap more maps. Um, and you know, tried to build our process to do that. Even if we'd solved the process to do that, the sheer file size that makes the game is ridiculous. So that's a little bit of a problem for us. Uh, you know, as we add more maps, the game download can become really, really, really big. So that's probably something that will be, you know, there's a bunch of sort of technical challenges that we'll be looking into going forward, and you know that's probably one of them. As we add new content, how do we do so in a way that you know doesn't fill up a, you know, we're already filling up your RAM. We don't want to fill up your hard disk as well.
Awesome. Here's a cool one as well from Cypher. Given Dean's experience as a mountaineer, what are the chances we get some abseiling tools for traversing up and down cliff sides and getting down into cave pits?
Look, it's been something we've talked about, and I think we even threw around, you know, rope bridges and looking at some interesting physics type stuff. And we don't have any solid plans on it. There's been a few sort of ideas along the way that weren't part of the original design. This will probably break a lot of people's hearts, but fire was not originally part of the original design at all, and was kind of you know, a developer tried it out, and it sort of became a thing. I think it started off with fire arrows. Was it Francis who did the fire arrows?
Yeah.
And I think then Mason tried it with buildings or something, I think. Something like that. So that was, I suppose, a developer accident. And we've had a few of those, and I think they've been really good. Where basically one of the team, you know, sort of comes up with an idea, we'll try it out and see how it goes. And there's been a few that we've tried out that we've liked but not pushed forward with. So yeah, there's no concrete plans for that stuff. I think it does raise an interesting point around the purpose of the mountains. I think it was really important, and I think an interesting, I suppose, I think fairly new thing in our sort of subgenre is to not make every part of the map a place you can go to. And that allowed us to make really interesting looking mountains, which I think a lot of games just haven't done. But at the same time, channel the player in an interesting way. And I actually got that idea from having a discussion with Chet Fulzik, who was a writer at Valve for a long time. I am blanking on the name of the studio he's gone to now. They make Surgeon Simulator. Can you remember what they are? It's like too early on a Sunday morning. Anyway, he was really interesting to talk to just about in
Bossa.
terms of design. Bossa, that was it. He went to Bossa. So, you know, he took me through how they designed levels for Left 4 Dead, and they talked about pacing and how the players move around. And I'm sure you guys will remember that when we did our kickoff meetings for each of the worlds that we've done, each of the trains we've done, the first thing we start up is how we want the player to move around. So it's not like we just sit down and make a cool looking map. We actually think about how the player is going to move from here to here, you know, what the challenges might be from that, what the biomes are. And I think that's been a really successful way of pulling it through. It's just, you know, we need to get more terrains in the game so that people see that more and more. So that the danger sometimes with you know, maybe climbing and stuff like that is that it allows you to kind of break some of those a bit. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't. There's been a few times I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if we could have like ropes go down? Mainly, the problem becomes animation, not of the rope, say, because that's pretty easy. That's just, you know, essentially ragdoll physics. But animation of the characters, syncing that stuff up is pretty difficult. And we want to go through and do a whole bunch of work on our characters anyway, so that makes the problem even further compounded. So there's no plans for that at the moment, But I think there's a whole bunch of sort of ideas like that we've got on the, nice to have that we'd like to, if we get time, experiment with. But yeah, it only makes in the game if we experiment with it, and we think that it's salvageable and serviceable.
Cool. All right, here's a fun looking back at the development process one. What is what is the feature slash gameplay that you dreamed of most of Prospectors, but it didn't end up developing, and why? So it's one feature we avoided, and that makes you a bit sad.
Oh, I think, well, for now anyway, we had really grand plans with the orbital stuff.
Mm.
The orbital stuff's still there as the meta loop. And there was a whole bunch of stuff to do with the station and floating around it and doing a whole bunch of stuff that we had planned. I suppose the reason that didn't end up making the cut now is because we knew we could layer that in later, and it was kind of one of the more, I suppose, easier in a way parts to do, but not anywhere near as essential. We really did try and focus the project entirely on that core game loop of the planetary survival, and then looked at the meta layer stuff as something that we could develop and build on as the game goes on. And there's been a few games that have taken that approach. I think if you look at games that have a lot of progression type stuff, I'm thinking like Payday and stuff like that, that over time they dramatically changed how that sort of meta progression is handled between. But I was sad that we couldn't get all because we did a lot of cool stuff with the stations visually and stuff like that, but the game was just changing too much, and it's very difficult to build in a lot of that meta type stuff when the game's changing dramatically. For example, behind the scenes, your dropship is actually constructed of pieces, but we disabled the constructing of the dropship. In some ways, we'd get it all working and serviceable. We'd figure out an art pipeline, but we realized we were throwing too much stuff at players all at once. So we needed to be able to deal with that new player experience um, at the same time, because if we didn't, then people can't play the game. And I think if you look at one of our other projects, Stationeers, I think that a lot of people would really enjoy that game, but they really struggle to sort of figure it out because so much is required for you to understand it all in one go. And yeah, you just can't. And I think that the game can suffer a lot from that. So there are a lot of reasons that we cut a lot of stuff out, but that was one that made me sad. I suppose the advantage of it is it's something that we can and do plan to bring in more and more of as we go along.
Yeah, and I guess it kind of leads on. So that's something that's been really massive for beta is the large scale changes we've made across the game. When it gets a bit more structured with 1.0 launch, now that we've taken all that insight, how does the development process change for what we're looking at and what we're focusing on?
Well, I think we get to do a lot of stuff, and I think if you look at the games that I like and that I play, that many of them are all still being developed. So, I just saw in my Steam thing now there's ownable dumpers in Euro Truck Simulator. So, I'm looking at uh, my steering set and going, probably time to dust that off. So I like games that are continually getting developed and updated, and that's why I always sort of scratch my head when people would get mad. They'd be like, "Oh, that game's in early access; it hasn't released yet." It's like, what? Do you want the developers to finish working on your game that you like? Like when I've been playing a lot of Barrow Trauma, and I hope Regulus doesn't finish making that game. It doesn't stop
Mm,
because it's cool. I want to keep it. The guy who made Dwarf Fortress says that he's just, I think it's brothers actually. It's going to keep developing it. And so I think that's interesting. But I think what we tried to do, and I'm massively segueing off the question there a bit, but
mm,
um, instead of doing early access, which I think was really problematic, we said, okay, we're going to have a short, sharp period when the game will massively evolve and change tremendously. Then we're going to solidify the game down and continue to build it as and I hate all the businessy buzzwords, but a game as a service. And I think that's an expectation that a lot of us have without even realizing it as customers. Think about people getting mad that the Valheim dev team aren't pumping out updates all the time, despite them being a small team. Like, you can't just be pumping out an update every 2 weeks, So as much as I'd love there to be an update to Valheim constantly, it's a big ask to deliver stuff all the time. But yeah, so for me, I definitely see that 1.0 as the end of the beginning. That to me is the end of the beta period. It's the end of the game, I suppose, bouncing around all over the place, losing characters, stuff like that. Doesn't mean that we stop innovating or adding stuff. It's just the core of the game will be solidified, and then it'll be about what do we layer on top of it.
Nice.
Do you have
Cool.
anything to add on that, Don?
I really wanted to post a picture of Jack's original dropship editor, but I thought I'd better put a watermark on it saying that it was clearly an old prototype, just in case anyone's like, what the hell is this? I really liked all that stuff. That would be my one for sure. And the cool thing is, I guess it's not something that we've had to like abandon completely. It's just things
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
have accepted that we have to park to get the planetary loop to where it is now. We had
I think
to
it's
sacrifice some of the dream goals temporarily.
I think it's still correct to say that technically you have a buildable dropship. It's just that we've built it. There's only one
Yeah.
Yeah.
configuration.
Yeah.
But yeah, so behind the scenes, that's I think it's still yeah. You have a constructed dropship. It's just that we don't let you construct it.
Yes. Awesome. Here's a cool one with talking about our weather systems. So we've seen some of the amazing weather effects you guys have cooked up so far, but we're curious, will we be seeing any other world events? For example, various magnitudes of earthquakes, solar storms that affect electronics, volcanic events, flooding, acid rain, etc.
Yeah, definitely. So that's one thing I think that's worked pretty well. And we originally had a lot more biomes in the worlds, but we cut them down just because they were providing us a real problem in terms of performance and optimization. The more different biomes that you can see maybe in one go, the more textures that have to be loaded, the more problems we have on the weather front in terms of effects and transitions and stuff like that. So we'll probably see a lot more of that as we introduce new terrains that people can play in, because they'll have new biomes, and new biomes will have new storms, and yeah. But also because of the way we've built the game, we can add essentially modifiers and stuff like that on a even per drop basis. So you might be going into the same terrain, but you might be facing sort of a different challenge and stuff like that. So definitely, we've, I suppose, built a really robust system for us to be able to alter the mission that you're playing at the time. And yeah, I guess we plan to use that pretty extensively.
Well, it's kind of their foundation thing, right? So release is really going to signal the solidifying of a foundation of work that we can keep building on. Like just in talking about the electricity system in Tier 4 last week, the proposal of those solar storms came up, and that's a fairly trivial addition. So those sorts of things will be really easy to do. Earthquakes maybe
Definitely.
not so much, but yeah, it's
Well,
all really cool stuff to think about.
I mean, because I'd been thinking about earthquakes the other day. We can do the effect of them, maybe just not the land opening up, But that, so there's a lot of different things that we can try. But I think your point is kind of lines in with what we said before. Where basically our process is to come up with a cool idea and then try it out in the game and make an honest decision as to whether or not it's any good. Then, and that comes back to our games are played, not made philosophy, where we can write something down in design and tell ourselves it's going to be amazing all we want, but till we put it in the game, we really don't know. And I think people will have seen plenty of evidence as we've gone through the betas where we had a cool idea, tried it out, failed spectacularly, and then modified it to something that was actually half decent. And I think we
Awesome.
got good with that process on Stationeers.
Mm.
There were a lot of things that we said early on with Stationeers, one of our other products. We were like, oh, we're going to do it like this. And then and we said we're definitely going to do it this way. And we try it out. And then, we sort of mea culpa and go, yep, okay, no, we probably need to change that.
Cool. All right. Here's one that's going into obviously outposts. With outposts, will each character that a player has share the same outpost, or will there be a outpost per character? So not an account level, but a character level. Which way will that work?
Oh, that's a tongue twister. You can deal with that one, Dylan, while I'm still wrapping my head around the
Oh my God,
question.
I know he's going to do this, isn't he? So the outpost, your account will create an outpost. The outpost is stored locally. Your character will be able to join it. Your friends will be able to join it. Trying to remember how that relates to the question. Where's the
Yeah,
written version of it?
still
That'll help
trying
me.
I'm still
If
trying
you've
to
got, yeah,
get my phrasing right in my head.
yeah, but if you've got three
It's
characters
like
on
doing
an
my
account, will
taxes.
they? Yeah, will they all be able to access the same prospect, or will each
Carry the
character have their own
3.
prospect?
I believe they'll all be able to access it, but only one at a time.
Yeah. So if you have a character on planet, you'll have to take them off to be able to bring your next one down.
Yeah.
You know, one of the reasons we didn't try out the outposts and the betas is because of how we were worried about how the outposts would affect figuring out the experience. And actually, there's been a few decisions of things that we wanted to say turn on. You know, offline play would be a good example of one. Because we knew how important it was for the game to get that core right. And the only time we were ever really going to be able to iterate on that was through the beta. So the only time we could really play around and do really crazy stuff and try really outrageous things on the core loop was during the beta, which is the whole purpose of it. So we really tried to keep that true. And if we introduce stuff on the side of it, yeah, that wasn't yeah, that wouldn't have been good.
Oh, perfect. This one probably is one we've kind of talked about a little before, but it was around missions again. So, are missions randomly generated, or will they all be handcrafted like the map?
Well, I think it's a sort of a mixture of the two. So, and even the map has a degree of randomization with it, and that's something that we've played with consistently over time. About how we approach it, and also if you think about going on a drop as almost like a cake. So we start off with the terrain as kind of this base layer, and then we start layering different things on top of it that makes up the drop that you go on. So even though you might be playing the same terrain, we do different things with it depending on what you're doing on your drop. We can load in, you know, different things that are affecting this drop. Maybe it's storm all the time. Maybe there's different respawn settings that you face. Maybe there's different animal settings, and people will have seen some different examples of going into the same terrain with beta weekends, but having a very different experience. So that's I suppose even though yes it's a handcrafted map, there is stuff that we can do with it, and it's the same with the missions. Yes, even though we sit down and maybe make the core parts of the mission, we can actually fiddle around with that quite a bit, and that's something we've done, you know, to a limited extent as well. Being able to make sort of randomized or variable parameters of both the terrain in terms of maybe, you know, which caves are open and closed and which aren't. So an interesting example of doing this, but then sort of dialing back. What we originally did with the terrain was we were going to have some of the caves completely closed off. And what we realized was the caves were actually really good. And over time, we started actually leaning into the caves. And in fact, I just had to think to myself there. So early on in the first beta weekend, maybe even the second, we had the metal ores outside of the caves. And totally changed the experience. For me, the experience of going into the caves made us go, okay, let's not have any of the caves completely blocked off. So that sort of level of randomization got removed a bit. But again, I think for the better, we shouldn't just hold on to decisions and design things that we've made just because we made them. We have to be prepared to roll back on those if it makes sense. So yeah, I suppose long-winded way of saying I think there is still randomization that we can do to the terrains as they get turned into a drop that make it a bit different each time you play it. And over time, I think we're going to be able to get more and more and more, I suppose, variable on that.
Well, and
Mm.
also like without depending on procedural stuff to generate heaps of content, a lot of work's been done to make the tool set to let us handcraft those missions really, really simple. So the designer effort it takes to string together some objectives and make an interesting mission is pretty low. The biggest impact is probably coming up with a narrative reason for that story, and then doing things like getting Henry to write lines for it and those sorts of things.
Definitely, yeah. And
Awesome.
I think people will have seen a progression from that. When we first started introducing the missions, they were very linear. They were very specific. And then actually through a number of ideas directly from the team, we've been able to pull that system in a more, I want to say generic, but that's probably the wrong term, but a more variable way that allows us to, I suppose, better and more easily add mission content into the game with a degree of variability.
Awesome. Fantastic. Another one here, which is quite good, looking at our leveling system and our trees. Um, will players be able to max out their talent or tech trees in one particular area or overall, or will it be you have to be more selective with your expenditure of your points because there's no ability to purely max out a character?
I think one of the advantages we have with the game is being, cooperative game, for the most part. We're able to sort of not have to worry about some things in terms of that. So I do think that our general philosophy has been that people are probably going to be able to unlock most everything eventually with their character. That's been our, I suppose, general philosophy. Uh, I wouldn't necessarily say that's a hard and fast rule because um, that can be difficult to achieve or even indirectly. Yeah, so I suppose what I'm saying is we don't have anything against that should be necessarily getting in the way of that happening. But it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to fully support it either. And I think you'll see some trees that do just get locked off where you have to make a decision. You're like, I want to be this or I want to be that. Yeah. Because a
Awesome.
lot of a survival game is about how you grow your character. And so that's why we've got to be very careful with how we do things like respecing and stuff like that. Because you don't want to, a survival game is about choices and about consequences. Do you choose to do this thing now to help you later, or wait and get a different result later on? That is, I think, at its core, a massive part of a survival game. So if we just let you um unlock something and sorry yeah undo you unlocking something and then unlock something else just with impunity, it could really disrupt the experience of the consequences of the decisions you make as you go along. And I think going back to that person's question before about how do we make the game um, interesting and people wanting to come back to it, I think that's a big part of it. It's about making you make consequential decisions. I think if you look at our approach to building, it was the same thing. It was like we don't just want building to be for building's sake. There's plenty of games that do that. We wanted to say, okay, why do you how can we make it so that you need to build a base or that you really want to build bases as you go do these things? I think leaning into the kind of missions that we want to do with the exotics, which we're really only just sort of scratching the surface on, is because basically you're just part of the first cohort now. You're just kind of landing and acclimatizing to the planet, and later on you'll start to get the resources. That allows us to really dial into the okay. Now we've got this cool building system. Now there's a whole bunch of reasons for you to build stuff. Or you've got vehicles, so you need to maintain the vehicles. You need to have a building to do so. And yeah.
Awesome. That's fantastic. All right, so one in around our deluxe edition. So, from Ramses, hi Dean. Earlier there was mention a deluxe edition would be overhauled. Is this still the case, or if the team decides to go forward what is currently offered. He can't wait to spend his Dean bucks at the station gift shop to get a nice Mo plush he can bring on missions or put around his drop pod. I forgot to mention that we have apparently unofficially made Dean bucks and Rocket bucks.
Well,
Community has decreed.
nice. So I think the supporters edition is actually live, isn't it?
Yes, and there is the first mention of it. Well, you would bring it up today, so
Well,
it has
well,
now officially started.
I would say the first mention of it would be the fact that it's on our Steam page,
Yes,
or
you're
am I
right.
just
Second
seeing
mention.
that? Yeah. So,
You are correct.
so that was something that was brought out. Big Fry, and a number of YouTubers, a number of YouTubes brought it out, brought it up. That and in fact, Valve even directly queried me on it originally. I called it a deluxe edition. That was my fault. We really should have called it more of a supporters edition. Just because of that, people expect maybe a deluxe edition to be maybe 20% more on the price. I just didn't like the term season pass. We realigned that better, and it's something that we want to add more content to as we go along. Like I said before about additional content and monetization, we're just trying to be really careful as we do that. And I think that not getting all that set up and people who wanted to upgrade having to go through refunding the game and then rebuying it. It was really, again, comes back to that. The game comes first. The development of the game comes first. Everything else was secondary. So, we had to work over time to get that working, and Valve had to do a lot of work for us behind the scenes to get packages all set up and that. So it was unfortunately a complicated, not an easy thing to do, but we've got there. We've got there finally. We certainly really appreciate the people who do go out and get those supporters edition, because we don't have a publisher pulling us through with this stuff. We did go out and kick tires with a bunch of publishers, but we just didn't find anyone who fit. So we kind of went in for the scary process of doing it ourselves. It's less scary now because we've had so many pre-orders, but yeah, getting some good revenue coming in just gives us the confidence to keep our team really solid. We have a really good team, very expensive team though, very senior team. So um, people buying those supporters editions definitely help keep us all happy and paid.
Fantastic. And I guess if you look at too the Builder Supports edition with the next 2 DLCs included, I guess how does the roadmap work from now for those coming out over the next stretch?
Well, I suppose we have to make the stuff. That's the thing. So we've been thinking about it as we went along and pull stuff off. But I suppose again coming back to that, the game comes first. I like DLC and expansions myself because my favorite games, I want more. And so, I think of Paradox games for me. And it's like, I like the little DLCs, sure. But I really want the expansion. I really want the ones that add a whole bunch of new, real stuff, not just new models or something like that. So I really like that we've made the plans for the expansions and stuff like that, the chapters. But I think our primary 100% focus is just on the 1.0 now, because we've got to make that as good as it is, and so I tend to swat away the distractions. So I suppose what I'm saying is there's a whole bunch of cool ideas and things we're working on for those, some really outrageous parts of it as well, but um, it's we're just I think too many companies sacrifice their game and favor of trying to pump out content, and I don't think that's necessary. I think if we make a really good game, um, the making good and interesting DLC and making them financially successful is pretty easy, really. Beyond that, if we make the base of Icarus really good, then people will want more content, and yeah, that's kind of my approach.
Nice.
I don't know. Did you want to explain that one a bit better?
No, I mean, I think you explained most of it. In terms of the actual reality of it, once we get into it, I think it's just going to be the way I've been explaining it to the team is the development over the next couple of months is probably going to be exactly the same as the development over the last couple of months, except with the Christmas in the middle, and maybe we'll be allowed outside
Yeah.
or back in the office. But Yeah, it's like the once we start to make room for that longer term work to start working towards those bigger sort of DLC feature things, then we can. But yeah, they're certainly not going to be. It's not like release day kicks off and then straight away we're getting stuck into those. We just want to, like I mentioned earlier, just figure out how much figure out how much we can do once the game's live, and then start to put some update cadence stuff around that.
Yeah, I
Nice.
mean, I think of it as like I've thought of the beta period as like pouring concrete. The concrete's still been wet. We've still been able to do stuff and make changes. The end of the beta period is where that solidifies, and then we can sort of build on top of it. Um, and so and I think that beta weekend process has been enormously successful for us. I think a number of people were frustrated. They were like, "Hey, why couldn't we play between it?" But I'm 100% resolute. I think that there was going to be no way that we, as a relatively new group of people together making this game, um, uh, could have kept it all going constantly all the time. We were trying to achieve what many big publishers struggle to do. Think of many game launches and how they normally go. I'm pretty proud that we we stayed up, we stayed operational. And we were able to do a really focused period of play and feedback and really carefully analyze that and then go away for 2 weeks and get ready and go with that. And I think about it like rocket launches. Imagine if you know SpaceX were doing a rocket launch every day or something. They don't get the time to go back and analyze and figure stuff out and make the changes. So the beta weekends were about us getting a whole bunch of lessons, and then we could actually have a formal process of sitting down together on the Monday afterwards and saying, okay, how did this go? What does this mean? And what changes should we make? And we're just able to get a really good process. I do think though, it's gone on almost a little long, and that's why I've been resistant of really publicizing, say, massively this last beta weekend. I just feel like the beta weekends, there's a danger of you starting to misunderstand what the game is, and it just feels like a frustration grind fest because so much is changing and you lose your character or whatever and stuff like that. We needed to end that process and start. The game needed to start sort of growing up a bit and maturing.
Also, just so I can shill for the feature upvote for a second. Part of that process for us, just so people know how we use that feature upvote, is um, some of the team are sort of looking through the feature upvote throughout the weekend. You've probably seen Alyssa and they're merging tickets together and wrangling votes. And then come Monday, we form that into two lists. One of the most upvoted features, or the ones we thought were the major ones that really need to be addressed. And then there'll be a whole list of less obviously actionable stuff that we'll just provide as like a feedback document to the designers, so they're aware of all the stuff that was through there. But the stuff you put on feature upvote really counts and is really useful to us, just to have that stuff written down, and also show that it's not just like a one-off expectation or experience. Like it's something that's being considered by a lot of people. It's really useful.
Yeah, and as we've reiterated over the last few weeks, something that's been really important is focusing on, I think, as Dean's mentioned, the game experience, the play experience. So, I've heard a few times people be like, "Oh, this ticket's been there for ages," and they'd be like, "Yeah, no, it's aware," but in terms of where our focus is, it's always about that played not made experience. And so, yeah, everything is taken on board. I imagine every single one of you listening would love to have an ear in those meetings because they're fantastic to hear your feedback getting applied.
Well, I think
Um,
the feature upvote thing has been enormously successful as well. I,
mm.
I was very, very pleased with the quality and the quantity of stuff we were getting through in there. I think it also really helped me because it gave me it made me feel good because I realized that people really kind of got the game. If that makes sense, it really made me realize that a lot of people really understood the game. Yeah.
Mm, fantastic. Here's a unique one. This is from Jaquam. Perception of a full release versus early access is very different, and player expectations for content, bugs, and technical issues tend to be high for a full release. This can lead to, e.g., poor Steam reviews. Have you considered releasing as early access to be able to add more content and address remaining bugs and technical issues, or are you going full steam ahead with 1.0?
I just think there's too much baggage with early access. And I also think it sends the wrong message about a game like this. Again, and I'm not a big fan of business buzzwords, but it is a game as a service. That's the approach that we've been taking. So yeah.
Awesome. I've got two more questions. This is one around our lore and storyline. How narrative driven do you see the story being going forward beyond release? We've seen most of what lore is currently available on the Icarus website as some small snippets and beta missions. Are you going to make direct campaign missions to follow specific storylines and lay it out? Or is most of it going to be more nebulous world building and require reading between the lines and piecing together snippets? They also think Sol is the best and they want to see him in more DLC expansions.
How much do we want to say about that one, Dylan?
You'll hear a lot of soul.
Yeah, we give you that much.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I did answer a question in the lobby before, so I guess it's okay to say here. But the at least for the game we were making, the narrative was there to support the gameplay and enhance that experience rather than the other way around. And I think that's where it's really cool for world building. I know Henry, our writer's got a whole bunch of cool ideas he'll want to push with, but we'll really be trying. The game comes first, like Dean was saying earlier. And some people really appreciate the world building and getting really into the lore. I personally really like it when it's left a bit vague and people can kind of fill in the gaps themselves. I've really enjoyed reading some of the discussions in the Lore Conspiracies channel in Discord. But yeah, I think we'll just have to wait and see.
Cool. All right, I'll do one last question, one for each of you. And what I'd like to hear is if you had to summarize your feelings of how the last 7 beta weekends are gone, and then one thing you're most excited for as we go into 1.0 launch, what would that be? So I'll start with you, Dean. What would be, your quick summary and the one thing you're looking forward to?
Summary of what? Sorry.
How you feel like the last ever beta weekends have gone? If you had to really summarize it as like, what was your feeling about the success of it, or what you've taken from it? What would it be?
Well, I think for me, the successful part of the beta weekends has been that ability to do rapid iteration. And I think that that's something that's really difficult to do in game dev. And I think to me, it was really heartening to see all that work we put in the preceding years to make a game that allowed us to be able to rapidly iterate it, even sometimes in the beta weekends. That I think was a real highlight for me. And I'm sad. I think our customers understand it. I think it's something I'd hope that the video game media would look into a bit more. Because I feel like the game media talks a lot about a lot of stuff, but they never really talk about how games are made. Or at least very seldomly, maybe because it's just not interesting. But I think the fact that we do AMAs and that our customers get that interested in this stuff, I do actually think people are really interested in how games are made. So I think that process really worked really well. And that's definitely a credit to the team. So I think that beyond that, what I'm most looking forward to from that is as vehicles. Probably, I think the vehicles will change the game completely. And just the component system that we've got for them, the way they interact with the building system. It's just and the stability system. I'm really excited for that.
Awesome, that was great. Dylan, yourself.
I think it was being able to see how we could apply the sort of engagement we had with the community from Stationeers into a bigger scale game. Just because one of the funnest things, and I'm kind of piggybacking off Dean's point about the rapid iteration, because like one of the funnest things about working on Stationeers was that you could have a conversation with 5 people in Discord late on a Friday night, and they would propose some idea, and then after talking it out for a bit, it would actually be like a workable, really cool idea, and then that could be worked on that night, and in some cases it would be, people would be playing it the next day, and that unfortunately it's not quite as feasible in a game like Icarus, but that's part of the price we're paying to have that steadier foundation. I mean, Stationaires has been bubbling away there with sort of monthly content updates for years now, but like now's a good example where if you look at the last blog post for it, they've had to step back and do a lot of sort of infrastructural rework at the base level to be able to keep supporting that ongoing building on top of it. I feel like with Icarus, we've got the benefit of we've gone in with all the experience from games like Stationaires, and we've been able to build that really solid foundation. So it really is like launch really is a launch pad to just be able to start doing that rapid iteration on not just like bug fixes and stuff like that, but also quality of life things and content, and just being able to see what we can do with that over the next few months is really what's exciting for me. I get that that's not quite as cool as vehicles, but I think it will actually result in a lot of really, really, really cool stuff.
I love that. Oh, brilliant. I've actually got one last one here I want to ask you guys, because I think it's something that both of you care a lot about, and it's from Kevity Search. So, on the whole, it feels like the game has been developed with a lean towards multiplayer play. I'm curious how much thought is being given to the solo player experience. And I know this is a really important one for you guys. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
I think that I don't necessarily fully agree that the game has been specifically made for a multiplayer experience. Like, one of our foundational pillars was it's fun to play alone. I think we've tried to make the game so that you're almost encouraged to play it multiplayer, sure. But I think there's a big difference between saying that the game is fun to play alone and saying the game is easy to play alone. And I think that's sort of the difference that we've been pushing for. The game's not necessarily easy to play alone.
Nice. Oh, perfect. We will wrap it up there. A big thank you to both you, Dean and Dylan, for joining us this morning and answering a bunch of questions for us. Obviously, a lot more in here we didn't get to today, so sorry if we didn't get a chance. Obviously, limited on time, but yeah, we'll go away and have a look if there's anything in there that we need to pick up and answer. We'll make sure that we have some answers for you down the line. But otherwise, enjoy the rest of Beta Weekend 7, and thank you for all hanging out. Otherwise, we'll see you at 1.0 launch. How exciting is that?
Woo!
Brilliant, guys. No, thanks heaps for tuning in. We will see you next time.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.